From claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt.
EWTN Radio presents The Miracle Hunter with Michael O'Neill.
Welcome to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. I love when we talk about future saints, and this week will be no exception as we have a future American saint, Michelle Duppong. There's a brand new book out written by author Patti Armstrong. We'll be talking with Patti later in the show about this incredible future American saint whose handling of suffering is something that we can all learn from. And I'm excited about our other guest as well, Pierre Farragu. He's the lead producer of the musical, Bernadette the musical. Of course, that relates to those apparitions of Our Lady of Lourdes, to that 14-year-old girl, Saint Bernadette Soubirous in France. Some of the most famous apparitions in history. We'll be excited to hear about how this musical came to be. Later in the show, we'll be talking about They Might Be Saints. And if you want to watch the latest episode of They Might Be Saints, you can tune into EWTN on coming up. And every week, we air a new episode of They Might Be Saints. And you can go to theymightbesaints.com to see what's up and coming and to watch on demand any of the episodes, including the Martyrs of La Florida. In the battle for souls in pre-colonial Florida, the bloody persecution suffered by Spanish priests and Catholic Appalachian men, women, and children is a forgotten story that must finally be told, and that is They Might Be Saints, the Martyrs of La Florida. You can also check out my series, They Might Be Saints. Other than They Might Be Saints, is Explore with the Miracle Hunter on Saturday, February 14th at 5:30 p.m. We'll be in that Central Time. They'll be airing the episode of Champion. I traveled to Champion, Wisconsin, where the Virgin Mary appeared to a Belgian farm worker, Adele Bryce, in 1859, and this is the first and only church-approved Marian apparition in the United States. And it's worth noting that just last week, Adele Bryce, that visionary, was named a servant of God, so she is firmly on the path to sainthood, and she can advance from servant of God venerable to blessed and to saint, and she would join the likes of Saint Bernadette Soubirous, the Fatima children, or any of the other Catherine Labouré or others, Juan Diego, visionaries who were canonized after they saw Mary. Later in the show, we're going to be looking at the Might Be Saint of the Day. For today, we've got Blessed Vicente Villar David from Spain. In the 365 Days of Mary project looks at Our Lady of Pellevoisin in France. And the question of the week, were the new norms changed in order to approve Medjugorje? I'll answer that tricky question in just a little bit. And the miracle of the day is the second miracle of Lourdes. Let's take a look at the miracle news. We do this every week where we talk about the miracles happening all over the world and those things that relate to miracles. And there was an interesting story that was on Aletheia and other Catholic news outlets last week that reported that a 13-year-old boy, Austin Appleby, he helped save his family after they were carried offshore while paddleboarding and kayaking. And changing water conditions and currents pushed the family about 8.5 miles away from land, leaving them stranded in open water. And recognizing the danger and the need for outside help, Austin decided to swim toward the shore to alert rescuers. And he swam approximately 2.5 miles through rough ocean conditions, and the swim reportedly took about 4 hours and involved strong currents, waves, and physical exhaustion. And despite all these challenges, he reached land successfully and was able to notify authorities, which led to the rescue effort being launched. And emergency responders located and rescued Austin's mother and siblings who had remained in the water awaiting assistance. And the rescue prevented further harm to the family who had been exposed to dangerous conditions for an extended period. And when Austin got to the shore, he collapsed, called for help, and then passed out, and didn't even know whether his family was still alive. And hours later, after a major rescue operation, they were found cold, exhausted, but safe, having drifted nearly 9 miles out to sea. And according to this article, Austin said that he prayed during the swim and credited his faith with helping him to continue. And this is an incredible story of a boy whose faith kept him swimming to save his family lives. In another miracle news item, it was a significant announcement coming out of the Catholic Church in Ireland. The Irish Bishops' Conference formally confirmed a miraculous healing connected to the Knox Shrine. I went there a few years ago to film, and this is the first recognition at this site in modern history. And this shrine already acknowledged the healing attached to this Marian apparition following decades of careful investigation by church authorities and medical experts. And the miracle involves a woman who visited Knox in 1989, and she was suffering from a severe case of multiple sclerosis. And at that time, she was brought into the shrine on a stretcher, unable to walk, and with many symptoms of her illness deeply affecting her daily life. And she experienced a sudden and complete recovery from her paralysis and other debilitating effects of her condition. And church officials, including the local bishop who announced the decision, stressed that the recognition came only after a long and cautious process, and this included reviewing medical records and expert testimony to determine that there was no current scientific or medical explanation for this dramatic change in her health. And the church's medical bureau and diocesan authorities worked over years to reach this conclusion before formally declaring it a miracle. And we see this happening at Lourdes many times throughout its history. But at Knox, this is perhaps the first modern miracle that's been formally investigated in such a rigorous way. So this is noteworthy. I've posted the link to this article on my Facebook page of The Miracle Hunter. Let's check out Catholic Pub Trivia. We do this every week where we ask a trivia question and give it a prize to an emailer who writes in with the correct answer. And the winner of this week's trivia will also win a DVD that's been gifted to us by the producers of the film Triumph of the Heart, which came out last year, and its amazing portrayal of the final 2 weeks of St. Maximilian Kolbe's life when he volunteered to share a starvation bunker in Auschwitz with 9 condemned men. And it's incredible watching the dying prisoners forge a bond and find hope and spiritual strength that is redemptive for all of them. The name of that film is Triumph of the Heart. And here's the question for this week. We're going to be talking about Fulton Sheen on the news coming up as his beatification is about to be announced. So the question for this week is, what was the name of the Emmy Award-winning show of Fulton J. Sheen? If you think you know that answer and want to win the prize, the Image of the Faces of Mary, or this week actually, the Triumph of the Heart will be the prize for this week. Send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and the fastest answer with the person with the answer is going to get that prize, and answers will be posted on the show page on miraclehunter.com. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Patti Armstrong about Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. We always try to keep our eye out for Americans on the path to sainthood, and I feature them in my television series, They Might Be Saints, in my book, They Might Be Saints. This is something of great interest to me. These Americans are great role models to us, and it's not just these people who lived centuries ago over the ocean in Europe somewhere, and there's dusty old prayer cards and statues of them, and we can't really relate to them. But these are people who lived in our modern world. We're so excited about the canonization cause of an up-and-coming saint, Michelle Duppong, and there's a brand new book called Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering, and that's written by Patti Armstrong. Welcome back to the show today, Patti Armstrong.
Thank you, Michael. I'm honored to be here. I love your show, so it's an honor.
Thank you so much. It's great to have you back on, and this is a saint that I think a lot of people are excited about, and I think that we're always interested in these young saints and these modern saints, and so here's one right here from our very own country in the United States. And so I know you've written a lot of various articles and stories and books about faith-centered stories. What drew you personally to tell this story, the story of Michelle Duppong?
Well, first of all, I knew her when she was alive. I consider her parents friends, and I was part of the story. So when she was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 30 and given 2 months to live, everybody was shocked because so many people knew her. And so I was among the people praying for a miracle for her. And so So after she did die, I was at her funeral. And then when the cause was opened, I did some articles, and it seemed like I was just going to do one article, and then somebody else would ask me to do an article, and then somebody else. I'm like, okay, I guess I need to do this. And then I was asked to do this book. And so I said, okay, let me pray about it. Let me talk to the family, because I wasn't sure. I just felt really busy. And then I realized I did really need to do this book. So that's how I kind of fell into it, but I was a part of the story. I knew Michelle, and I knew how loved she was by so many.
Well, we're so glad that you did. And for those listeners who might not be familiar, who was Michelle Duppong, and what made her witness so compelling?
Yes, good question to get us started here. She grew up in Haymarsh, North Dakota, small area outside of the town of Glen Olin. So it's an unincorporated area where her relatives on both sides of the family came here as homesteaders. And she grew up loving the land and the country, and graduated from North Dakota State University, became a focused missionary for 6 years. And then her last year was at University of Mary, right in Bismarck, back to North Dakota, where she just loved it here. And then our Bishop David Kagan hired her as the director of faith formation in Bismarck, for the Bismarck Diocese. And so that's one of the ways so many people got to know her, because she put on this thirst conference. It was her idea, and the bishop said, okay, let's, if you think you can do it. 7,000 to 8,000 people came.
Wow.
Came from all over, some of, top Catholic speakers. And she was doing a lot of stuff just trying to engage the smaller town churches and put on missions. And people knew her from the Thirst Conference because she gave a video message at the end of all the masses to encourage people to come on out and attend. So all of a sudden, we hear that she was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 30. And I think there was close to 300,000 people following her on the Caring Bridge site, because so many people from Focus knew her. So many people from the Bismarck Diocese. People are sharing this story. So you've got hundreds of thousands of people. But not only that, everywhere she went, her loving demeanor, so Christ-like, always wanting to bring everybody to Christ, but caring about that other person and listening to them. So that when she was at the Cancer Treatment Center of America outside of Chicago, when she left to come home for hospice, it took 4 hours for everybody to come and say goodbye to her. And so that's why so many people knew her. There were so many different ways that she touched their lives.
Amazing. We're talking today with Patti Armstrong, author of the brand new book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering. And, of course, the central point of the story is that Michelle faced such intense suffering with remarkable faith. And what did you learn I know you knew the story personally, but when you wrote the book and you dug into it even further, what did you learn that challenged you or changed your views?
So when I knew her, I didn't know her well. I had, maybe had conversations, was at some events, knew her parents better. And so to interview dozens and dozens of people, family, friends, acquaintances, priests and sisters who credit her with having a big role to play in their vocation, giving them the strength, even suggesting it to them. And I included at the end of every chapter some of her writings and podcasts, which is from a book that the Guild, Michelle Duppong Guild, put together of her writings and speaking all together. So we had permission to put that. You hear Michelle's words at the end of each chapter. So to get to know her to the extent, what I learned was that three things I'm going to say. One is, from the time she was young, she stayed away from gossip. And so many of her childhood friends said, oh yeah, if anybody was going to gossip, Michelle walked away, or she changed the subject. And I thought that's a pretty powerful testimony, because I think it's something we're all tempted to maybe, and even convince ourselves, oh no, this is just information. Oh, this is interesting. But to kind of stay away from that. And she was so good at it from the time she was very young. And that she was evangelizing everywhere she went because she had Christ at the center of her life. And so the way she conducted herself, her caring for other people, really drew them in. And so that's what you need to do to be an example of Christ, is to smile and to love, and, in whatever capacity God puts you, to do that. And then the third thing was redemptive suffering. None of us want to suffer. We do not sign up for it, and neither did Michelle. She prayed for healing the whole entire time. But at one point, a friend visited her when she was still in her apartment and said, "Michelle, aren't you upset? Aren't you angry?" Because she always seemed so calm and joyful through it all. Yeah. And the doctor said, yeah, she was suffering really severely, but you wouldn't have known it. She didn't complain. And they said, "Michelle, aren't you upset?" Because she was doing such good work, and she was doing God's work. So come on, God, what's the deal here? It's just how you treat your friends, as was it
right.
St. Teresa of Avila once said. Yeah. And she pointed up to the crucifix and said, "If it's what he wants, it's what I want." It didn't mean that she didn't pray for healing, but she had a faith of God knows what's best. And if he wants this to happen, it's to bring a greater good. And Monsignor Shea, who was the president of University of Mary then and is still, he wrote the foreword to the book. And he asked that question that so many people probably are tempted to ask. Okay, why would you do this? She was doing good work. She was making a difference in the world. Like, why didn't you let her continue? And he made the point that now even more people know about Michelle. More people know about the example. And in the documentary, Radiating Joy, that the Focus group made, organization, missionaries, the bishop said in that documentary, he said, this is what Michelle wanted. She wanted to turn people to God. And if after, now looking at her life and realizing what an inspiration she was, she's continuing to bring people to Jesus through her example.
Absolutely. And suffering is something that everyone can relate to on some level. How does Michelle's story speak to people who are struggling right now? Why will this book help people when they learn about Michelle's story?
Because we don't get to choose. She didn't get to choose. We all are going to suffer, and we all know that, but we're always hoping, if everything's going well with us right now, we're all hoping, okay, not me, or don't make it too bad. But we don't know. We don't know what's going to come, but we know things come every day, big, small, sometimes it's big. It's what do we do with it? And so the power of redemptive suffering, and I've written a few articles on this whole move that's accelerating for euthanasia and assisted suicide, that they're missing out on the power and the beauty of redemptive suffering, which Michelle understood. She did not waste anything. So I know at one point she had just had a painful procedure, and one of her sisters was in the room, and she had explained she had just offered up for a politician, for a pro-abortion politician, that she understood that there's power in that. And I quote, I heard a priest once say that suffering without offering it up just hurts. But suffering when you offer it up is supernatural. And so as not to waste any of it, that we can follow Michelle's example. And God truly used her to touch the lives of so many people. And so how much of that was through her suffering? She had a year of suffering. So instead of living for 2 more months, she lived another year while fighting the cancer. And towards the end, her doctor asked her mother, was it worth it? Was it worth, her adding another 10 months onto her life? And her mother, Mary Ann, recounted so many of the amazing things, including, the hundreds of thousands of people following her carrying bridge, all the people whose lives she touched, the example. And she said, how can you measure that kind of impact by having those, additional 10 months? So anyways, and so her lesson is redemptive suffering, because you can turn to her as an example. You can turn to her asking for her to pray for us. But most of all, and there's a couple in the book. One was a very close friend of hers And then the other one was the brother of her boyfriend, and they ended up marrying each other thanks to her matchmaking. Well, they have a son who has he has an incurable disease short of a miracle. And Kyle helped out at the farm towards the end, and he felt like he attended the school of some suffering. He understood how the family handled it, how they came together in prayer, how they never lost their faith. And he feels like this now is strengthening him as he goes forward with his cross that he's bearing.
Yeah, truly amazing. We've been talking today with Patti Armstrong, author of the brand new book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering. And as we look forward to her canonization cause, we know she's a servant of God now, and she will be on her way to venerable once her life of heroic virtue has been established. When those documents are submitted to Rome after all the interviews and all the review by Rome. And then some miracles will be needed to move her along. How is that looking as far as miracles being reported attributable to Michelle Duppong?
Yeah, my guess, my total non-theological guess is that's not going to be a problem. And so often, as you know, Michael, more than anybody, that so often when a cause is opened, it's because their reputation is getting stronger and spreading after they die. It's taking on a life of its own. And her parents and the bishop at the diocese were continually getting cards and letters of people, some who never even knew Michelle but heard about her, who felt impacted by her life, and people saying that they had prayed to her and felt that their prayers were answered. And Bishop Kagan said, and I quoted this in the book, that regardless of whether they felt whether their prayers were answered or not, there was this one common trait he was hearing over and over, and that was a piece of acceptance of whatever God's will was. And he said, and that's how Michelle lived her life. And so to see people impacted that way and having a big prayer intention, but feeling a sense of peace regardless of what God decided in their particular situation. But there are people in the documentary that Focus put together, Radiating Joy. Bishop Kagan shares a story that seems to be a miracle. Now, we did not put miracle stories in the book, and the bishop actually requested that we not do that, and I think it was a very, very good suggestion, because I've written on a lot of causes that are open, and people love miracle stories. But he wanted Michelle's life to stand on its own. And, you know, people can chase after miracles. You would know that more than anyone.
Yep.
And sometimes just be too focused on it. Like, yes, we love miracles. It really shows the power of God. We want miracles, but we want more than that, or we should want more than that. And so this book is about the faith, regardless of what the outcome is of every prayer intention that we have. And so, yes, there are miracles, but whether there's miracles or not, and healings, in the end, nobody lives forever. Lazarus isn't still alive today, right? You know, that eventually we need to make our faith the most important thing, and that's what Michelle did.
And for people who pick up this book, I know someone out there might be feeling overwhelmed or discouraged. What do you hope they discover by reading Michelle's story, your book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering? What is your hope for these people?
My hope is that they feel strength, and they, just like it says, hope in the depths of suffering, that they always hang on to hope. And I mean, we just think, oh, we've got a Catholic audience. Like, yeah, they know this, that you don't, you know, but there's people choosing assisted suicide and failing to see the beauty of every aspect of our life, even if there is suffering in it, and that God can lift us up. Jesus can enter into the story with us and give us that strength, and that we won't waste any of it. So my hope is that people will see through the life of Michelle the value of every life, and especially their own, and that even if we are suffering, even at the end of our life, if we can't get out of bed, there's so much power in our offering up our suffering and our praying, and that at no point should we ever give up and have despair, but to believe in the power of Christ and that our life is full of value.
Very well put. Well, we're so grateful to you, Patti Armstrong, author of the brand new book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering. People can pick this one up at Sophia Institute Press, online, or anywhere where Catholic books are sold. Thank you so much, Patti, for joining us on today's program.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, God bless you. Thanks.
God bless. That was Patti Armstrong. Incredible. People should check out this book, Michelle Duppong, Hope in the Depths of Suffering. And for people who are interested in her cause for canonization, you can go to michelleduppongcause.org for more information and to see her progress from servant of God, venerable, blessed, and then to saint. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be looking at the question of the week. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. Hey, I love getting your questions. People write in from around the world with questions about miracles happening in today's world and those that have happened centuries ago. And I have a pretty interesting email inbox. I get questions from all around the world each and every day. But I also love answering questions in person. And I was just in Baton Rouge last week giving a presentation, or a series of 3 presentations, actually. And I always open it up to questions. The question and answer is my favorite part. And for people who are interested in having me speak at your parish or your conference or your event, you can go to the Miracle Hunter website, click on the Contact tab, and send me a message that way. Or you can just send me a message to questions@miraclehunter.com. And maybe I'll be speaking at a parish near you sometime soon. And during that presentation in Baton Rouge, I got a really great question. The question was, were the new norms changed in order to approve Medjugorje? So I gave this presentation called How the Catholic Church Investigates the Supernatural, and I sort of traced the history of miracle approval and investigation in the Catholic Church. And one of the things that I mentioned was that there was a new set of norms that were released in 2024. The previous ones were out in 1978, and after nearly 50 years, they updated these. And so we've talked about this so many times on this show, even in 2024 when they first came out. It was big miracle news. And so the question is, when you look at Medjugorje, the alleged apparitions from Bosnia-Herzegovina beginning in 1981 and continuing to the modern day, were the new norms changed in order to approve Medjugorje? And so this is a very interesting question. And I think this is probably where I fall in line with this line of reasoning. So the idea is that over the years, in the 1978 document most recently, you had these 3 categories of approval. This category of constate supernaturalitate, established as supernatural. These are the apparitions like Lourdes, Fatima, Guadalupe, these very famous Marian apparitions that the Church has said definitively that this was a supernatural event, that Mary really did appear, and that Catholic faithful can put their faith in it. And then there's this category of, they say, non constate supernaturalitate, is not established as supernatural. This is kind of the middle category where they say, well, maybe she appeared, maybe she didn't. We need more information. And so they're not condemning it. They're just saying it's not, they don't have all the information they need to make one of these formal statements of supernaturality. And then there's the negative judgment, which is constate non supernaturalitate. It is established as not supernatural. So definitely not supernatural. There's obviously a case of could be a case of a hoax or money making or some other pursuit of fame, or the theology just doesn't add up, or whatever it is. The Church gives it the red flag and says, nope, not that one. That's not a supernatural event. But if you fast forward from 1978 to 2024, this past year, the Church came out with a brand new document that has 6 categories now instead of the traditional 3. But probably most notably, the thing that was changed the most, or the things that sticks out to me, is that while there still is a category where they condemn an apparition and say, nope, definitely not that one, there is no longer an approved category. There's no longer one that says, the Church says, yes, this is truly God. This is a supernatural event. This constate supernaturalitate, established as supernatural. It's no longer one of the choices anymore. The Catholic Church no longer approves Marian apparitions as supernatural. And so the highest level the Church will give is that it'll call it nihil obstat, which in Latin means nothing obstructs, or there's no problem with it, nothing gets in the way. Shortly after the Catholic Church announced these new norms in 2024, they came out with their judgment on Medjugorje, the long-standing Marian apparition starting in 1981 that proceeds all the way to this modern day. We still see messages coming out of Medjugorje, and it had never been given the approval of the Catholic Church. Well, now that the approvals were no longer possible because of the new document, the Church very promptly came out with a statement that said nihil obstat. And it said there's nothing that stands in the way from the faithful going there, people believing it, but we're not going to call it supernatural. So the question is, were the norms changed just in order to approve Medjugorje, or to recognize Medjugorje, or to give it that nihil obstat? I don't know. The timing is suspicious, isn't it? The fact that for so many years they didn't say anything about Medjugorje, and then just right on the heels of the new document being released about the new norms, a new statement about Medjugorje just came out. So it's my theory that the norms were changed just in order to make a comment about Medjugorje coming out of the Vatican. We don't know that for sure, but the timing sure seems interesting. So thanks so much for your question. And if you have a question for the Miracle Hunter, you can send me an email to questions@miraclehunter.com, and maybe I'll be answering your question on the air next week. Let's take a look at the 365 Days with Mary project. We do this every week where we look at the Marian devotion of the days that lines up exactly to the day's date. You all know Fatima, May 13th, or Guadalupe, December 12th, or Lourdes, February 11th, but believe it or not, there's a different other Marian devotion that lines up each day to the calendar year. So for today's date, February 14th, we have Our Lady of Pellevoisin in France in the year 1876. And the story goes that in 1876, a young woman, Estelle Faguet, she lay dying from tuberculosis, but on the 13th of February, when all the sick were expecting her death, Our Lady appeared near her sickbed. And this occurred on 3 successive nights, and then, as Our Lady had promised, the sick woman was instantly cured. And during the visits, Our Lady of Pellevoisin frequently spoke to Estelle, saying, "I am all merciful, and I have great influence over my son. What distresses me the most is the lack of respect for my son. Make known my glory." And she was granted another vision of Our Lady, robed in white and wearing on her chest a white scapular with an image of the Sacred Heart of Jesus. Again and again, Mary pointed to the great need for penance and a return to God. And that is today's 365 Days with Mary project from 1876 in Pellevoisin in France. And for more information about 365 Days with Mary, you can go to the website, you can download the free app, or you can pick up the book, 365 Days with Mary. Let's take a look at the miracle of the day. We do this every week where we find a miracle that happened on this date in some year in Christian history. And this is kind of a famous one, or it's part of one of the most famous miracles we've got as Catholics. On February 14th in February 1858, during what is known as the second apparition at Lourdes, the young peasant girl, St. Bernadette Subaru, returned to the grotto of Massabielle after her first unexpected encounter days earlier. And this time she did not come alone. Curiosity and skepticism had spread throughout the town, and several adults accompanied her, unsure whether Bernadette claimed to see what was divine, imaginary, or even diabolical. And the atmosphere of all the people there was pretty cautious and not that credulous, and they were shaped by the Church's long tradition of discernment regarding alleged visions. And during this second encounter, Bernadette performed a deliberate and telling act. She sprinkled holy water toward the apparition, asking aloud, "If you come from God, draw near. If not, go away." And according to her testimony, instead of retreating, the lady smiled and bowed slightly, a response Bernadette interpreted as peaceful and affirming. And this moment became known as the testing of the vision, reflecting a deeply Catholic instinct not to accept extraordinary phenomena uncritically, but to submit them to prayer, sacramental signs, and humility, rather than excitement or fear. But that is today's miracle of the day, the second apparition of Our Lady of Lourdes to St. Bernadette Subaru. And let's take a look at the sainthood news of the week. We always do this where we talk about those people on the path to sainthood. And it connects with my television series, They Might Be Saints, and my book of the same name, which you can get from EWTNRC.com. Just last week, we talked about an American who was on the path to sainthood as a servant of God. That was Adele Bryce. She's the visionary of Champion, Wisconsin, of course, in 1859, those visions. But perhaps even more exciting, just this week, the Holy See has officially given the green light for the beatification of Venerable Fulton J. Sheen. And of course, you all know him as that American Catholic bishop, the media evangelist whose cause for sainthood has been stalled for all these years. After a 6-year delay beginning in 2019, we don't really know the full reason for the pause. I think there was the clergy abuse cases that needed to be cleared out of the way and the legal disputes over his remains. The Diocese of Peoria has confirmed that the beatification process can now proceed, though a date and location has not been established yet. And the local and Catholic communities have responded. Leaders in the faithful throughout the United States expressed gratitude and support and excitement for the advancing of Sheen's cause. And Bishop Tika, he highlighted Sheen's lifelong commitment to evangelization and devotion to the Blessed Mother. And diocesan officials said they are working with the Vatican's dicastery for the causes of saints to finalize details for that ceremony. And in 2019, they were going to do it in Peoria. So I assume it's going to be the same then. But there's been that long delay. Everybody wondered why, and we don't know quite really yet. But the great news is that the beatification is back on track, and then we just need a date and a place. Perhaps all it took was an Illinois pope to move the canonization cause of an Illinois bishop along. But lots of people out there, including myself, are very excited about this news. Let's take a look at the Might Be Saint of the Day. We talk about people on the path to sainthood and whose feast days and death anniversaries line up exactly to the day's date. And we've got Blessed Vicente Villar David from Spain. And his memorial is today, February 14th. And he was the youngest of 8 children, and he was educated by the Pilares. He studied engineering in Valencia, and he was married to Isabel Rodes Reig, the main witness to his life and martyrdom, who died in 1993. And he had a Christian outlook and morality amongst his peers, and he spread that amongst them. And he was known for charity, giving charity to the poor. And he worked as an industrial engineer in the family ceramics firm. And he held several important municipal posts in which he put the church's social teaching into practice. And he was always involved in parish activities and Catholic youth groups. And he was against the anti-religious sentiment of the 1930s in Spain. And he worked to save persecuted priests and religious. As he was taken away to his martyrdom for supporting his faith, his wife said, "See you tomorrow." And he answered, "Until tomorrow, or in heaven." Those who've studied his case believe he had a cause for canonization based solely on his life, not just his martyrdom. And he was born in 1889 on June 28th, and he died on February 14th in Manises, Valencia, on February 1937. He was beatified by John Paul II in 1993, or I should say in 1995 by John Paul II, after his decree of martyrdom in 1993. And that's today's Might Be Saint of the Day. That's Blessed Vicente Villar David. With one miracle, he will go on to be known as Saint Vicente. And he's today's Might Be Saint of the Day. And for people who are interested in the project They Might Be Saints, you can tune into my television series, They Might Be Saints, which airs on EWTN each week. And coming up this week, we've got the episode on the Martyrs of La Florida. In the battles for souls in pre-colonial Florida, the bloody persecution suffered by Spanish priests and Catholic Appalachian men, women, and children is a forgotten story that must finally be retold. And that is coming up in They Might Be Saints, the Martyrs of La Florida. We need to take a short break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking with Pierre Farragu, the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical, the brand new musical out about the life of Saint Bernadette Soubirous. Stay with us for that.
Now, back to the Miracle Hunter on EWTN. Here's Michael O'Neill.
Welcome back. You're listening to the Miracle Hunter radio show on EWTN Radio. This is Michael O'Neill. I'm the Miracle Hunter. People who go to my website, miraclehunter.com, know that there have been many Marian apparitions throughout Christian history, perhaps as many as 2,500 that have been claimed, a much fewer number that have been recognized by the Catholic Church. But when we talk about the most famous of all Marian apparitions, some people might point to Fatima, some to Guadalupe, and many people will point to Lourdes, that site of the incredible apparitions, the 18 apparitions witnessed by 14-year-old Bernadette Soubirous of France. There is a brand new production. It is Bernadette the Musical, and it is a retelling of the story of Bernadette. And it's incredible to bring what we've known from the past, those apparitions happening in 1858. They're brought to life on stages across the United States and across the world. We're so excited today to be joined by Pierre Farragu, who is the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical. Welcome to the program today, Pierre.
Thanks, Michael, for having me.
Yeah, it's wonderful to talk with you. And this is such a brilliant idea in my mind, to bring back to life this incredible moment, the greatest of all Catholic miracles, some might say, of modern times. And you bring it to life on the stage. What was the moment that you realized that Bernadette the Musical could work not just as this famous story, but as a musical on the stage?
Well, that's a very good question, Michael. And for me personally, it's when I actually watched the French version of the musical in France. This musical about the little Bernadette premiered in Lourdes in 2019, and Providence wanted that I meet the makers of the musical, the producers of the musical in France, and I went to watch it. And I was absolutely amazed by how powerful it could be to simply seek to entertain the public, really focus on entertainment, making a great piece of entertainment out of the life of a saint. So I grew up in France. My dad is in the Order of Malta, so Lourdes was really part of my childhood. I went there as a child. I very much enjoyed the spirituality of the place, the Marian spirituality of the place. But to me, as a child, the story of Bernadette wasn't a story I really wanted to hear. It felt like very gloomy. She was very poor. She was very sick, fragile health. She was bullied by all these adults. And then after the events, she went to the convent. So as a young boy in my early teens, I really didn't feel interested by that part of the story. And when I discovered the historic reality of who Bernadette was, this amazing little girl who stood for what she saw in front of the police, in front of the church authorities, without fear, despite being from the most humble family in town, was actually a beautiful story. And I thought, telling the story was probably the kind of impact you want to have on culture, and especially as a musical. It's really the popular culture, that's mass culture. You can touch millions of people by just telling the story of the little girl.
That's right. We're talking today with Pierre Farragu, the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical. Now, Bernadette, as you mentioned, is a figure that many people, they think they know already. She's a famous saint. Many people know the story, at least a little bit. So how did you approach telling this story in a way that feels fresh and human and perhaps opens people's eyes up to something they thought they already knew?
It's a great question. And I think the approach really mixed, of course, a religious perspective. So it was very important for the creative team to have the blessing and the support of the shrine in Lourdes for the initiative. But at the same time, they really wanted to tell the story in a very universal way, without making it per se a religious show, but really a piece of entertainment. And the way they did that was very simple. The main contributors, artistic contributors to the story, are actually not believers. They are not Catholics, but they absolutely were subjugated by the facts, by the actual story of the little girl. All what we have very rich original records of the story of Bernadette because she was interviewed so many times. She wrote so many letters. She received so many letters. That's the historic records that are extremely rich. And actually, the show business people and the church people sat at a table and went over the story exactly as it happened and converged instantly, became very, very close and worked together in a very, very positive way, in a very easy way, by just sticking to the historic truth. So the musical maybe 80 or 90% of the dialogues in the musical are actually straight from historic records. The relationship between Bernadette and her dad, Bernadette and her mom, is from like the letters they wrote to each other during all their lifetime. So when you stick to the truth, you create a beautiful story. And I think that's it is as simple as that.
Beautiful. We're talking today with Pierre Farragu, the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical. And people can find out more about Bernadette the Musical at bernadettethemusical.com. As a lead producer, Pierre, what was the biggest creative or logistical challenge to make this all work, to bring it to life? And how did you solve it?
So the biggest challenge was actually extremely logistical, and it was to bring the grotto on stage. Mm-hmm. Of course, the grotto is a very important part of the story. I like to say the grotto is one of the characters of the story. It really comes down to that. And so we had to scan with a laser the grotto in Lourdes, and then we rebuilt it in a way that it can be mounted and dismounted on stage very rapidly, and then traveled from one theater to the other one. So that was by far like the most interesting challenge. And then quite interestingly, on the artistic side of things, as I said, creating the plot, creating the story was actually very easy by just, sticking to the historic records. And then when it came to write the songs, like the original songs in French, and write the songs in English, like adapt them to English, so it's a lot of work. It's a lot of creative work, and it's bringing around the table a lot of different creative minds and having them work together. But believe it or not, it wasn't that challenging, because like this little girl, Bernadette, she's easy to understand. You fall in love with her almost instantly. But the reality is that they found the work very, very easy, because like the character of Bernadette and how you perceive it and what you want her to sing is actually very universal. So that part was relatively easy.
Wonderful. And I know music is the powerful element in all of this. You can express these themes of faith, of doubt, of transformation. How does this adapted score, help to convey those themes in this program?
The score is written by Grégoire, a French pop singer, a very, very successful, very famous pop singer in France. And I think he really he's a great melodist, and he really wrote these songs, this music, as modern pop music. My co-producer, Kelsey Grammer, likes to say Bernadette is more of an opera rock than a musical. So the songs are very, very, very modern. They are like very similar to what you like in terms of music and melody, to what you would hear on radio today in France or even in the US. And I think that's what makes the little girl in the show, at the same time as she's very truthful to who she was based on the historic records we have, she's also a very modern little girl. She sings about how she feels, about what she experienced. She sings about the relationship that gets established between her and the apparition, and then her realization that the apparition is a Virgin Mary. All these elements that are very, very, very important in the development of the character and the development of the plot are actually transcribed into very contemporary, very easy to appreciate music. So the ambition really is to create a musical that will speak to everybody, and the music is doing that. It's a music that speaks to everybody.
We've been talking today with Pierre Farragu, the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical. And what is your great hope, Pierre, for those people who will go into this theater and take in the musical, Bernadette the Musical? What is your hope for what they will experience?
That's a great question, Michael. If you think about the little Bernadette who comes back from the grotto, her parents, the police, the church, like her priest, they all have the same reaction. They're like, but Bernadette, what you're telling us is nonsense. Do you really think we're going to believe you? And she always said, oh, the lady didn't ask me to convince you. She asked me to tell you. And this idea of just telling the story and concentrating on that, I think, is beautiful. And so the first thing that I really want is to tell the story as it is, without seeking to convince anybody, and tell it to as many people as possible, and making the storytelling a very enjoyable, entertaining experience. And let's face it, if we do that, we can touch hearts, and we can let people move on with the story and decide on their own, what the next step is for them. And if it's someone who is very advanced in their faith, it might be a great opportunity to grow spiritually, to come closer to what, Bernadette took from her encounter with the Virgin Mary. And if you're significantly more remote from the faith, that might be the beginning of a path for conversion, the beginning of a path of searching the truth. And then, of course, you have all these very simple messages that Bernadette communicated to the crowds during these events that I hope will be communicated by the show to the public. So one of them is, I fear nothing because I've always told the truth. This beautiful, certainty, self-confidence, sense of security you can find by recognizing the truth and sticking to it. And also another aspect of Bernadette that is sometimes forgotten is that despite being probably the poorest in her village, she's always been very, very keen on serving the poor, serving older people, serving sick people. When, after the events, when she joins a convent, when she entered a convent, she was writing to her dad and to her brothers, encouraging them not to become rich and to remain poor. So you have all the relationship of Bernadette towards poverty is also a beautiful testimony for our times. And I hope just telling the story of Bernadette can convey this message as well.
Wonderful. Well, I think people will be excited to see this. This is playing in theaters all over the United States. People can go to BernadetteTheMusical.com. I know it's playing in the Athenaeum Center in Chicago in February, so I'll be excited to see it there. So thank you so much, Pierre Farragu, the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical, for putting on this great production and for joining us on today's program.
Thank you, Michael.
God bless. That was Pierre Farragu from Bernadette the Musical, the lead producer. This is exciting that this is visiting American theaters nationwide, and people can go to BernadetteTheMusical.com for more information how you can get tickets. And that's all the time we have for today's show. If you missed any of this episode or want to catch up on past episodes, you can go to EWTN.com/radio, check out the audio archives, or download the free EWTN app. I'd like to thank our guest today, Pierre Farragu, the lead producer of Bernadette the Musical, and Patti Armstrong for talking to us about Michelle Duppong. Check out my series, Explore with the Miracle Hunter, on Saturday, February 14th at 5:30 p.m. The episode on Champion airs, and that is where I travel to Champion, Wisconsin. I drive up from Chicago, where I am, where the Virgin Mary appeared to Belgian farm worker Adele Bryce in 1859. And this is the first and only church-approved Marian apparition in the United States. And I'd like to thank you for joining me today on Miracle Hunter, where from claims of healings and visions to the world's most inexplicable events, whether you're a believer or a skeptic, the truth is always worth the hunt. Talk to you next week.